Okay, so we're doing a podcast about Twin Peaks: The Return, and it's me, Malmrose Projects. This is my YouTube handle, and I'm with Nick Spheres.
Hi again.
Yeah, because
we
we're huge David Lynch nerds, and uh, we just have to do this.
yeah, well, it's been a long time coming, like we were both pretty active, I think, on Twitter when all of this was kind of going on, and you made your analysis video, I made my analysis video. So it's like if any two people were going to talk about this in some sort of public space, it would probably be us
Yeah.
and now.
And
So it just made sense.
so this isn't a commentary track. We're not talking over any footage, but what we're doing is basically, for me, what the goal of this is allowing us a chance to get out all of our thoughts that couldn't make it into a video. Basically, like we're going to talk about our interpretations. We're going to talk about like the way that people reacted to the show. We're going to talk about like aspects of the return that we really liked, but we couldn't really talk about in our videos and stuff like that.
Yeah. And hopefully we can do this in a way that isn't absolutely incoherent.
Well, first of all, it's David Lynch. Second of all, it's The
Right.
Return. So it's going to be hard to keep it coherent when the material we're working with won't make that easy.
Right. Yeah.
But
So
the first thing I want to say, because I just finished watching a video, and the video was called Twin Peaks: The Return: A Critique of Nostalgia, and it was by Screen Prism. And this video was uploaded 3 days after I uploaded my analysis, and they basically kind of had similar points to me, but I watched it and I kind of realized while watching the video and while thinking about the return in general and thinking about the reaction in general, I thought that I kind of might be an asshole because I think that one of the interesting things about the return is that this is the most like talked about a TV show has ever been in terms of themes and in terms of meaning. Like it's and the problem is that everybody has their own analysis, everybody has their own videos, everybody has their own interpretations, and what happens is this all becomes part of this big sort of blur of the sort of Twin Peaks fan like reception that it's become so like synonymous with the fan reaction that it's almost hard to talk about the show itself because any attempt to like get into it is like kind of difficult because of the surrounding culture of the show. And this is something that I feel was a little bit true in the original show, but I feel has become heightened with the rise of the internet and so the speed at which people are talking about Twin Peaks and the volume of materials at which people are talking about Twin Peaks actually makes it really difficult to talk about Twin Peaks because like everything either has been said or will be said, and like it becomes like almost lost to the culture surrounding it. And the reason why I bring
right.
reason why I bring all this up is because I think that's part of the theme of the new show is a lot of the themes of the new show seem a bit self-conscious in a way that was less true of other David Lynch films. But the thing about the self-consciousness is that everyone caught onto it, but nobody can quite make sense of it. Like everyone seems to get that there's some sort of like meta quality to the show, but what the meta themes are implying is sort of the thing that's up for debate a lot of the time. And for me, I feel like the reason why I want to start with this is because I feel like in order to talk about the return, we have to first make sense of why. And that's one of the major things that every video on almost any film that's talking about meaning seems to skip over, gloss over, or kind of overlook. Even when they cover it, they tend to overlook it, which is why. Like, if the return is self-conscious, if it's meta, if it's referencing itself, why is it doing
Right. Why is it
that?
doing
Yeah.
that? Well, okay. I so I have a kind of specific thing with this, and it's maybe not. It's not like minutia or anything. It's just that. Let me ask you this question: would you consider David Lynch to be a postmodernist?
Not by not in he I don't think he's intending to be so, but I think that he is an example of postmodernism.
Yeah, but it's odd because he's not a postmodernist in the same sense as like Tarantino is a postmodernist. You know what I mean? Like it's not this ironic thing. You know, it's not this joke. It's not a big joke. It seems fairly genuine whenever he does these sorts of things. Like he's not making fun of us. You know, like what we would come to expect of like a kind of postmodernism. You know, that whole thing with like Inglorious Bastards, where you know the final scene is all about there's the Nazis and we hate them, but then at the end it celebrates them, but then like the scene before that is showing them cheering at the death of Americans. So it's like when we celebrate the death of Nazis, are we, you know, doing the same thing as like the death of, you know, it's that sort of thing. That is like so truly like firmly this ironic postmodern kind of thought. Whereas with David Lynch, you know, I don't think he's concerned with irony, really. I mean, I think he is, but I think it's to a greater affect, maybe, you know? So it's like this is why I ask, because, you know, is he a postmodernist in the sense that, like, yes, technically what he's doing is postmodernism, or is it like postmodernism that rejects the core aspect of it, you know, it's the unironic kind of critical media response, you know. Blue Velvet is a detective movie that criticizes detective movies, something like that, you know, criticizes culture, criticizes the authority of those of such things, and you know, all that. In the same vein as like the return is meta narrative. And this is what gets into why it's like it's meta narrative, but it's not meta narrative that's like making fun of you. You know what I mean? It's not ironic meta narrative. It is ironic, but it's not ironic in the sense that we kind of think about when we think about something like postmodernism. So my question, I think, going into this is when we're talking about why with the whole meta narrative angle. You know, I think it's fairly easy to fall into the trap with the postmodern thing, with the meta narrative and postmodern thing, to say that David Lynch is doing some kind of big joke, but he's not. I firmly believe that he's not, and especially when you're watching the show, the affect of the thing is not a joke. There are jokes, but it's not a joke. You know, there's that scene where Dale, now Dougie, like, you know, goes into the casino and he's doing the whole casino thing, and he's, you know, hello, you know, every time he wins. It's not, that's a joke, right? But it's not insulting, you know, it's not a criticism of us. And if it is a criticism of us, it's not an ironic criticism. It's a I don't know. You know what I mean? It's a little. I'm probably not making any sense, but it's it's a lot of it's a lot to unpack in a simple joke, because the joke is not at our expense, but it is at our expense. But it's not at our expense in a way that it's making fun of us. It's at the expense of our expectations. But you know, why did we have expectations? Is that a question we need to ask? You know, there's a lot that goes into the why of the thing, you know. So I'm curious as to what you think about all of that I just said.
Yeah, and that's why I brought up that Screen Prism video, because it brought up the meta narratives without really asking why, and I think it does answer a little bit, but basically, as far as I can tell, people's responses to The Return are in one of two camps in terms of what they think Lynch is trying to do. The first is prank. They think he is fucking with everybody, and he wants us to hate him. The second is sadomasochism. Basically, he wants us to be miserable so that we learn something and grow to love him or grow to love the show. Like, he's basically forcing us to go through something uncomfortable so that we will gain something from it. And I see that as a false dichotomy. I don't think that that's either of those are what David Lynch is doing. In fact, I don't know how much David Lynch knows what he's doing. I think he feels what he's doing rather than knows it. And the reason why I say that is because I think I said this in my video, but I'm not sure. I think David Lynch is more interested in asking questions than in providing answers, but it's not questions that he himself knows the answer to. I think he's asking questions, and he's trying to use art as a way to make sense of those unresolved feelings, and also a way of offering those unresolved feelings to the audience to make sense of it. And I feel like Eraserhead is like the prime example of that. Like, it's all about his anxiety about his life that we then read into it, and then that helps contextualize like the story of that film in a way that might lead into insight into like how people might experience similar feelings to what he experienced. Like, he puts it out there like an object and says, "What do you see in this?" And then what we say helps inform what that thing is. And the way I think about The Return is it's not making fun of the audience, and okay, the way I think of it is it's very similar to one of my all-time favorite movies ever, which is F for Fake, the Orson Welles film.
Oh yeah, that's a great film.
That film has been widely known to be a prank, and
it's not.
It kind of is, but it's making a point and using deceptiveness to make that point. And it's using like the faulty like nature of storytelling, editing, and the ways that these can be exploited to convince people of ideas regardless of their validity. And what he's doing is he's putting people into a frame of mind that he can then fuck with that frame of mind so that we then learn to doubt that frame of mind. But he's not doing it because he wants us to hate him or because he wants to torture us. He does that because he wants to explore something that seems like for F for Fake seems to be Orson Welles' most personal film of the two I've seen, at least. That film comes across in a way where it seems like his mentality is he's trying to send a message that people can take away from it without needing to think so hard about whether or not he's an asshole. He's more dedicated to making sure that that point has been made than whether or not it's appealing to hear. And that's kind of how I feel about David Lynch, is he's sort of exploring these ideas, these thoughts, these themes, and he's not really thinking so hard about whether or not this will make people upset or whether or not this will, make people grow to like it over time. I think for example, Dougie Jones is the prime example of what people refer to when they say that this is all a big prank, because it should be common knowledge for people who've seen it, which if you haven't watched the new show, then spoiler alert, please don't watch this until you've seen it. Dougie Jones is Dale Cooper becomes Dougie Jones for I think 13 or 14 episodes of the series.
Yeah, and he lives out an entire parallel life as this character.
And the reason why I don't think that David Lynch hates the audience is because I think he loves Dougie Jones. I don't think this is all ironic. I think he sincerely has an appreciation for Dougie Jones. And same thing goes for all of the characters from Twin Peaks that have returned. And same goes for a lot of the new characters. And I think by contrast, I think he fucking hates Mr. C. And that's why he put him in there.
He's a being of pure evil.
Yeah.
You know.
And so David Lynch's earnestness, which you covered in your video with the whole fix your hearts or die thing, his earnestness shows throughout the entire new season. And that earnestness is something that is not consciously thinking about whether or not he's not thinking Dougie Jones might piss people off. He's thinking, like, this will upset some people and it won't upset others, but I'm going to do it because this is what makes the most sense. This is what, he's going off of what he thinks would be right for the thing he's making rather than what reaction he's necessarily trying to get. However, I do think he does have some degree of sort of irony to it, but it's an irony that's more sincere than something like Tarantino. And that irony doesn't show itself so much in Dougie Jones as much as it does specifically in little moments. And one of the best there's two good examples of that. The first is the sweeping scene, the infamous sweeping scene where it's just somebody sweeping for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And the other one is much more specifically the one where Gordon Cole is on a date with some lady in a red dress, and then Albert shows up, and then it takes fucking forever for her to leave.
Yeah.
But that scene is fucking hilarious because it's all building up to him saying, Albert, I really worry about you. And that's and it's that sort of like really extremely dry humor that is present in like all of his movies. And like to say that kind of thing is some sort of hateful or ironic relationship with his audience is more like, no, he just thinks that's funny.
Yeah. He thinks it's funny.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of things you just said. But one of them I think gets into this idea and I don't know, I'd kind of like to. So he's a transcendental meditation advocate.
Yes.
How much do you know about that?
I know very small amounts of transcendental meditation from people who have gotten into it. I know very small amounts about David Lynch's history with it, but I don't know much.
Well, I don't know that much about it either, but I'm going to speculate because there's one aspect of meditation that I am aware of, and I've read his book, and stuff, but he's got this. Well, it's not him specifically. It's that ideology is very concerned with presence. Like being somewhere, like really being there, like being alert. Hearing people and interacting with a space in a true way. That idea of being present. And the reason I bring this up specifically is because The Return is so much about that. It's about it's about experience, it's about universal experience. It's about all these different people experiencing the world in different ways, somewhat unrelated, but it all kind of comes down to the same very basic core. So in a matter of 18 hours, basically what David Lynch kind of does is he makes a really good vessel for this idea of like the world as it stands, the population, and then like specific versions of the way in which people are not present. But at the same time, he does argue that evil is very present. Mr. C, is calculated. He's there and he's in the moment. He's awake, right? Like, that's what I mean when I mean presence, by the way. It's like being awake in your own kind of. So, but Dougie, on the other hand, is Dale being not awake, being not present. He's forced into this position of just not being present. But the thing is, his impresence, I don't think that's a word. His lack of awareness, his lack of being awake, with the exception of any, like whenever there's any sort of crisis, it reflects a kind of cultural unconsciousness. Man, I'm sounding ridiculous, but the point is, Dougie represents a kind of person that we all kind of are sometimes, the person that that hears words but doesn't really listen, the person that thinks but casually, not actively thinking, does things but doesn't know why, gets led around, like his desire for coffee in the show, is just, it's so similar to my own desire for coffee. Before we were starting, I didn't tell you this. I was about to be like, yes, I'm ready. And then I was like, damn it. No, I have to have a cup of coffee, and it's like, it's an unconscious thing. Like, I didn't think, let me let me just put everything on hold so I can have coffee or whatever. I just did it. It's this like unconscious desire. And I know that coffee is like such a minor kind of blemish on the whole thing, a minor kind of microcosm or whatever. But it is a big kind of thing in the show, this idea of presence and being awake and being aware of who you are and what kind of place you have in the situation, the grand situation, where your place is, and also where your place is in like the spectacle of it all. And I think that's something David Lynch is very concerned with in making it, is his place within the spectacle of it all. And that's where we kind of blend narrative and meta-narrative in the sense, because David Lynch is very aware that he's making a television show that belongs in this culture of spectacle, and like what he's trying to do with that spectacle in order to comment maybe on the spectacle itself, also comment on our real situation, like you and I, our place in the world, but also in an unmeta way, in a direct kind of way. The show is also challenging, that preconception of the fact that we live but we're not alive kind of thing, which is a kind of a commonality, I think, in a lot of people. So I don't know, maybe that all sounds ridiculous, but I think the transcendental meditation kind of thing this is an idea that's presented in this kind of ideology, is that we are not awake, we are not alive in our own living body and our own living shell, and to what extent do we really control that? I mean, David Lynch smokes cigarettes, but does he want to every time he does? Does he think about it every time he does, or does he just do it? That's the idea of presence or whatever. So we're all guilty of it, but it's a matter of like really being aware of our place within all of this, where evil is always aware of its presence, whereas we maybe aren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'll let you jump off that.
I have thoughts.
Yeah, go. Great.
Have you ever played the game The Beginner's Guide?
I haven't.
I recommend it, and I'm going to make a point, but I'm going to start by backing up a little bit and say, yeah, I agree that there's meditative aspects to the new series, The Return. I don't know if I said this in the video, but I've said it elsewhere, that I consider The Return to be a meditative exercise. And what I know about meditation is that part of the idea is trying to learn how to live in the moment. Like, you're not focusing on your past, you're not focusing on your future, you're just focusing on how it feels to be alive right now. And that helps with anxiety, because like it helps you to not stress out about things possibly going insane, because it's like right now things are okay. And so meditation is all about learning to live in the moment. And film and art, especially art like film and like video games, is not about that. It's the opposite. In fact, a lot of the general consumer philosophy on art, which is so strange to me, is you can do whatever you want, just don't waste my time. And the idea is,
yeah,
if you are taking too much time to set things up, or taking too much time to get to a point, then you are wasting my time. And David Lynch, especially in this new series, his sort of what appears to be an argument being made through the film is that the things we are seeing, all the minutiae of the series, is not wasting your time. As in, those moments of dry, dull nothing are not a waste of time. And by extension, that's true in life, that like the moments that aren't super exciting and like big scale in our lives are not, like the moments that are not that are still important. The moments of just, going to the store and picking out groceries. Like, there's importance in the moment, no matter what the moment is. And the reason I bring up the beginner's guide is because the beginner's guide is a fucking brilliant game. And one of the most brilliant things about it is that the game is partially about how interpretation can be harmful. And what happens in the game, and this is a spoiler for one moment in the game, there is a game that he is playing. You're watching a guy tell you about games that have been made by a friend of his, and one of the games is you doing chores. And the game starts out as a horror game until you get inside of the house, and then it turns into a really nice, positive game where you do chores repeatedly. And basically, the game reveals that originally, that little game where you do chores, did not have an ending, and it just went on forever. But the guy said he added an ending because it has to end. There has to be an ending. There has to be a point. And I feel like that's very indicative of what the return is about, because the return is in part showcasing this idea that, like, needing something to be, like, constantly, exciting, constantly important, constantly making a point, constantly doing all these things makes life harder to live, because we become so used to the big spectacle that through escapism that we can't live in the minutia of the moment anymore, because we become too attached to this idea that things need to be exciting. And it's like, as someone who has severe anxiety issues, someone who can't avoid anxiety sometimes when I'm not doing something exciting, learning to fucking sit in a seat and not have anything stimulating me for a bit, and learning how to, like, not freak out when that happens is, like, important to, like, being able to function. And, like, that's sort of what meditation as an idea is like learning how to function through learning how to live in the moment. And the return very much has themes about learning to live in the moment, but it also has a million themes that are, I could go into all forever. But one of the main things I want to talk about that's sort of jumping off from that is Dougie Jones as a character, because, and this is sort of something that I've thought of after making my video, and I want to ask what you think about this. I think Dougie Jones is the actual protagonist of the return, not Dale Cooper.
Well, I mean, that gets into the bigger point of who is Dougie really, and who are all these people really, and to what extent are we present also. The idea is, here's the great meta narrative, right? It's Dougie is Dale. Dougie is Dale but not present, but Dale is Richard not present, that kind of thing. That's established. So it's like, how many levels of impresence really are there? It's like, it's like you make a tree of people, and you divide that tree up into what side of a person we're currently experiencing, and to what extent that even that minor, like, micropsychology is also dreaming about being someone else, and it just goes into this kind of spiderweb thing. But that's kind of how I feel too. I mean, the whole point is Dougie. I think Dougie is the key. Dougie's the key to all this. If we can get Dougie working, then
Good reference.
Yeah, thank you. But Dougie is the whole thing, but he's a small piece to a larger puzzle, if that, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess, anyway, what do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, the reason why I bring this up is because the last two episodes are very strange, and that's something that we will have to address later on. The last two episodes.
Got to talk about the ending.
But one of the key moments in the ending, I think it happens in episode 18, towards the very beginning, which is Dougie becomes reborn and goes back to live with Janie E and Sonny Jim, and he has a happy ending. We don't see much of it, but he has a happy ending. And then Dale Cooper has a fucking nightmare ending. And I can't figure out what that says about Dale, but what I think what goes on in my head when I think about Dougie having the happy ending is that that is really the to me that's the moment where that's the happy ending for the whole series. Like is the moment when Dougie Jones reunites with Janie and Sonny Jim, because we see Dougie Jones before Dale becomes Dougie, and when we see Dougie Jones, he's cheating on his wife, and he apparently has gotten in with the mob and stuff like that. We learn through all of this history that Dougie Jones, the guy who Dale Cooper replaces, was probably not a very good person.
No, yeah.
But Dougie Jones, the mind-wiped Dale Cooper, is a good person. He is as one-dimensional as a character can get. He is a good person. He has no ill will at all. He is completely absolved of any wrongdoing because he is too mindless to even...
He's pure.
Yeah. And
he's pure nothingness.
And even though it's like, to us, we're like so on edge because we want Cooper back, and we're like, we know Cooper's in there. Even though that's what's happening, really what we're seeing throughout the Dougie saga of the show is Janie E and Sonny Jim getting the father and husband that they fucking deserved the whole time, that they never got with the guy that we saw in the first place. And so having Dougie Jones return to that family is basically saying, like, Janie and Sonny Jim get to have a good family life now. Like, they're done with their bad history with the mob. They're done with Dougie Jones being a cheating asshole, and now they're happy and they have a good life together. And that's not shown very much. Like, it's to me, a lot of the Dougie saga is about the gradual reparation of a family that's falling apart. Like, and as a huge fan of The Shining, it's basically The Shining in reverse. And it's also kind of Eraserhead in reverse, because Eraserhead is about a family falling apart because the dad's kind of an asshole. I mean, it's more nuanced than that, but like, he's not very good to Mary, and he's not very good to the baby. And so Dougie Jones is sort of the inverse of Henry from Eraserhead. He is the mindless good person who eventually like gets the good ending because he
deserves it.
He's just a good person. And so like this idea that we're all rooting for Cooper is sort of like one of those false protagonist situations where I think part of the ending is sort of trying to out Cooper as a bit of a false protagonist in the new series. And Dougie Jones, the Dougie Jones that returns to Janie and Sonny Jim, to me, that I think of that as Dale Cooper from the original series. Like, he's a very stand-up guy. He's almost a quote-unquote Mary Sue, and that's kind of the point in the original series. He's sort of an archetypal good character in the original series. But that character, I think, comes out of Dougie Jones at the very end, because he comes back with, a full sort of consciousness. Clearly he's not stuck in that mind that he was in throughout the rest of the series, the rest of the return. So in my mind, I think of it as though whatever's happening and whatever the themes are, one of the major points is that really the main character that we're supposed to be rooting for all along is Dougie Jones. And so, maybe one way of looking at it is that Dale Cooper's return is sort of Dougie Jones' return to being a good father, but it's also like Dale Cooper keeps going after he could have just gone back to live with Janie and Sonny Jim and been happy, but instead he goes to try to fix everything, and that's kind of where the turning point is for the ending. Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
So one big one that comes to mind is just that it's an inadvertent thing, I think, too. It's like we don't want what happens. Dale to be trapped in this person. We don't want that. When we're watching the show, we're like, what? What is this? Why? Unless if you have expectations of the show, you don't want that to happen. You want Dale to come back and, well, you think you wanted. But that's also the David Lynch thing, is like, he never gives you what he wants or what you want. He gives you what you need. So he believes strongly that you need, something that isn't that. So, but anyway, the Dougie thing is like this inadvertent sort of situation we find ourselves in, where we, are forced to endure this kind of this kind of alternative thing that is absurd and weird and we don't understand. But he sticks around so long that it becomes kind of this entity in and of itself. Like, he stops being Dale Cooper to us after enough episodes. He looks like him, but we stop thinking about him in terms of like Dale being trapped in somebody, and we see him for the character in and of itself. You kind of forget that Dale is in the show a little bit. I don't know. I did, as I was watching it over the weeks. We get back and I'd say, I want to see what happens to Dougie this week. I'm not thinking about Dale anymore. Dale's gone. And everybody online was like, okay, it's been 5-6 episodes. Where the hell is Dale? And the point is like, yeah, who is Dale? Where, what's that? I'm into this other story now,
Yeah.
So that's the inadvertent kind of thing. And then at the end of the whole thing, Dale comes back and you're like, oh yeah, Dale. But Dougie gets to have his like moment with Janie, and that is somehow more affecting than like the stuff that goes on to actually happen with Dale.
Yeah.
I
do want to say, just as a note, I pretty much gave up on the idea that Dougie Jones was going to turn into Dale any minute after episode 8. After episode 8, I was like, they're clearly going to stick around with Dougie for pretty much the rest of this show. Sorry, I'm hearing sirens. I live right next to a hospital.
Oh no.
and a fire department. So, but yeah,
Perfect.
like, one of the things I want to say about Dougie Jones, and this is something that's very revealing about me, and it's also something that it's very personal. So I don't. The thing about David Lynch is that I can't say that I understand him better than anyone else. Like, a lot of people want to think that they understand his movies the best. I can't say I understand it the best, but I can say this much. I relate to it on a level that, and I think a lot of people relate to David Lynch in many different levels, but I relate to it on a level that's very different from anything that I see, because, and it makes me wonder, how it would be to actually meet David Lynch. But so one of the things about Dougie Jones as a character is sort of like, in sort of a meta sense, and sort of like discussing the show as a work of art. Dougie Jones is one of the weirdest characters ever put in any work of art, because it is strange to have 16 episodes of a character that does almost nothing at all, and like, it's almost absurd. It's almost like, to a degree,
right,
of absurdity. But
well, like, if
what?
Oh, okay. Well, like, if you're in a film school environment and you write a script where there's a character that's passive and doesn't do anything, and he's your main character, they will criticize the shit out of you for that.
Yeah.
Like, active protagonists are all that there is. You can't have a passive protagonist. Well, David Lynch did it. Anyway, go ahead.
The thing is, he's not entirely unrealistic. A lot of people might think that it's absurd because this would never happen, kind of thing. And while a lot of the stuff that happens around Dougie is absurd, including people's reactions to him in general, the character is not like, he's not, a lot of people would just say he's an idiot, but he's not. And what he is catatonic. And that's one of the major things about Dougie Jones that people don't recognize, is that his behaviors mimic mental illness very, very like strongly. And I've had moments where I've acted very similarly to Dougie Jones, as in I've had moments where I will zone out and stare off into space and my body will stop moving and I'll just be standing there, and it'll just be, and I can snap out of it. And that's one of the differences between me and Dougie, is that Dougie stays there for 16 episodes and I only stay in that position for like a minute. But I've had moments where I can just be so out of it that like literally I'll just be drawing scribbles just like he did in one episode. Like I actually see things in the show that I've done. And that's what's interesting, is that Dougie Jones, I don't relate to very many characters in any work of media, but I relate to Dougie Jones. I think he's a relatable character. And what I think is interesting about this is that nobody would ever like Dougie Jones unless they understood what it felt like to experience something like that. Like it feels like nobody, like the audience would reject it in droves, if they didn't understand what it's like to actually be in that position. And like
Right.
being trapped in your own body and not being able to get out of it while your body is just like basically a fucking animated corpse. That's what mental illness does to people. And that's what Dougie Jones is experiencing. That's what Dale Cooper is experiencing. And what makes it so interesting is that there's sort of an affection for Dougie in the show that I think is really respectful. It's not like the cliche of the mental hospital, when a character in a show goes to a mental hospital and then there's somebody just staring at the wall in the corner, and then there's somebody like trying to grab flies that don't exist or something. Like it's not like some fucking hack writer. It's like clearly David Lynch, whether or not he meant to, it seems like he understands catatonia and understands like that sort of repetitive dead-eyed sort of stare that people do, like, and and I've done it in public. I've done it in conversations. I've done it, while home alone. Like I've been Dougie Jones in my own life, and as a result, I just find it extremely relatable. And what I find interesting about that is that like people want Dougie Jones to be more, and David Lynch seems happy with him not being more. And that's what I think really separates The Return in a lot of ways, is that David Lynch seems to want to be okay with things that most people wouldn't be okay with. And one of that is being in a very, like neutral state like that. I mean, in a sense, that's also what meditation does, is it brings you into this state of like mindlessness, where you no longer are thinking about having to save the world all the time, and you're just sort of in a
living.
You're sort of living. And so Dougie Jones seems to be sort of a character that's meant to be empathetic, but that because people are so obsessed with the meta narrative and so obsessed with this idea that David Lynch is this auteur, ironic critic of people who like his material, because they have this idea in of who David Lynch is, I don't think people catch on that Dougie Jones is actually a really compelling character, as long as you recognize what is going on. Like I made my video on The Shining, and in The Shining I basically said that Danny's sort of emotionlessness is indicative of trauma, and that makes it a much more compelling character than it would be if he was this like happy, like absurdly childish kid, instead of this like dead, like zoning out kid, because that's like exactly the kind of experiences I've had while I was a kid. Like I've been in these situations, and so it means a lot more to me. And like that's one of those things that just gets sort of lost on audiences when watching David Lynch, and especially watching The Return, is like he is not making this because he wants to fuck with people. He's making it because Dougie matters to him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's that kind of gets to this larger point about, not necessarily David Lynch as an auteur, because I don't think he gives a shit about being seen as an auteur, really. He just wants to make art. But the art comes first to the celebrity. He rejects that outright, kind of thing. The idea is this level of acceptance, this kind of fluid, constant acceptance. He's writing characters that he's accepting no matter what. It's his default position is like people say he doesn't know what he's doing, that he's just he just comes up with ideas and then just does them or whatever. But no. That kind of recklessness of ideas is something we're fairly used to seeing in like things that don't criticize our situation, like in the spectacle, the grand spectacle, as it were. People write, the Big Bang Theory, right? You write these characters and they do shitty, horrible things, but the laugh track keeps going, sort of deal. It's unstopping. They never stop and question whether or not this character is like, shitty. That's the kind of like, we just do things kind of mentality. We don't really consider it. And so the thing is, like, David Lynch is different in that he gets an idea, and it's this idea for a character, but then like he suspends judgment, he understands them, he learns the character, he gets to know them really, and then he accepts them for that very thing. It's kind of like, and I know that this is like the stock answer at the moment, but like the trans FBI agent thing is like such a moment of pure, this is what I'm doing and this is why I do this kind of moment where he's written this character in a scene that doesn't really have all that much to do with the grand plot of the show or anything like that. Then again, what does? Just as a means for saying that I'm accepting. I'm going to accept you. That's it. That's all. It's a statement of politics. It's a statement of where I stand, kind of thing. In the world, in the situation. He challenges the situation by coming in and unnecessarily writing in a scene where this happens so that he can clearly say with everyone watching that he accepts somebody. It's like it's this moment of affirmation where it's choosing a side. It's saying, this is what I'm going to be doing here, that's important. I think it's very important. And it's the way he approaches all of these characters, and historically throughout his body of work, he's taken this approach, this kind of suspension of judgment approach. Like, I don't know, I think he approaches evil without kid gloves. Evil in David Lynch movies is, they're fucking evil. Frank Booth, he's not so concerned with giving him an awful lot of nuance. I mean, there is some understanding there, but the majority of it is an understanding so that he can decry it, so that he can say, so he can tear him down, is the point. He's the situation, right? So it's this anti-spectacle kind of thing where his priority, and this is mine too, and it's like it's the permanent lesson that we should be getting from filmmaking, is this idea of like universal understanding, universal experience. We experience the world through, in movies, countless movies of people living their lives in different sorts of ways, and it gives us a vehicle for understanding and experience and empathy and gaining some sort of worldly, knowledge by having experienced life through their eyes or whatever. So ultimately, that's kind of part of the meta narrative too, is like, experiencing life through someone else's eyes in the context of Dougie, Dale experiencing life through the eyes of someone else. Perspectivism, phenomenology, that sort of deal, which I think is a big part of the whole thing. I think that's a big part of the whole thing. That was an unhinged rant. I hope that's fine. But
fine.
The mental illness thing is really good, and I think it's apt for this whole thing too. Like, absolutely is the answer. Like, yes, you know what I mean. Anyway, Your
thing-
turn to speak.
Yeah. One thing I want to talk about is so people who think that The Return is criticism of stuff, I mean, it does have some critical elements, but I can, for people who aren't as familiar with David Lynch, people who maybe have only seen the Twin Peaks series and maybe Mulholland Drive or Blue Velvet, I can show people what it looks like when David Lynch is hateful or critical. It's a little series called Dumbland.
Oh yeah, I've never seen Dumbland, but I'm aware of it.
Dumbland is made out of hate, and it's not something I can make an analysis out of because it would take 30 seconds. Here's my analysis of Dumbland. It's a critique. It's a critique of the deadbeat father archetype in sitcoms and film. It's basically taking what Homer Simpson was for the early 90s, where he was sort of a critique of that stuff, later became sort of indicative of that stuff, and sort of more hatefully critiquing the sort of racist, misogynistic, and sort of like abusive undertones of that kind of character. Like the Married with Children type of husband who's an asshole. And that miniseries is extremely hard to digest in terms of like enjoyability. I think it's enjoyable because I love David Lynch, but it's made in basically MS Paint. He did everything himself. It seems like it didn't take more than like a few hours to put together, and clearly he didn't care. But that's the point, is like he's not trying to care. And like, having looked at other stuff that he's made that's like a little bit tangential to his sort of the main bulk of his work, for example, The Angriest Dog in the World, his comic book, his comic strip. People don't even know he made a comic strip, but the comic strip is another example of like clearly a bit hateful, a bit more critical, a bit more negative. And when he makes something negative, it's usually less nuanced than The Return, and it's usually more abrasive and less digestible. Another example might be Rabbits. I'm still not sure how I feel about Rabbits, but Lost Highway is another film of his that's more openly critical than pretty much any of his other films. Like, that's probably his most negative film.
Yeah, the Rabbits thing. I think Rabbits is directly a response to that Married with Children thing. You know, it's the criticism of the spectacle. It's this awkward, weird family show, but there's like a laugh track and stuff, and it's like really kind of showing it for its truth, which he doesn't handle with kid gloves. Like he throws it at you. I don't know. That's what I kind of take it as. But yeah, I don't know.
I think I said this in my video on that do you know about the dialogue of Rabbits?
I don't remember. It's been years.
Non sequiturs, but when you rearrange them in the proper order, it actually fills in a whole conversation, and the conversation is basically it relates to rape trauma.
God.
And that relates to Inland Empire, which is why Rabbits is featured in Inland Empire, is because it's basically, when you put it in order, some of the dialogue is basically reenacting a moment of being sexually assaulted. And
oh God.
Yeah, it's really dark. It's really hard to stomach. But
that's rough.
But it's also something that's clearly made out of sort of empathy rather than like sort of
right. It's not exploitation.
Yeah. And that's what's true in most things he's made, is that there's an empathetic element to it. And like The Return, I think, is empathetic too, but I think it's also critical of those who aren't there for the empathy. Like, I think you know, when I think of The Return, the weird thing I always think of first is Andy, because
oh yeah, that's a fine thing to
Andy, Lucy, Hawk, those are the real like characters that give me the most emotion when I watch it. And the Log Lady, like when I think about, I mean, okay, well, this is a big thing that I want to talk about in more detail, but the Log Lady's death is the moment that literally made me cry. That is the moment when I cried while watching.
I felt sick while that happened.
that scene is the most empathetic thing that I think David Lynch has ever made.
Yeah.
And this is another example where the meta narrative I asked the question, why did he do the meta narrative? And the meta narrative surrounding the log lady and surrounding also, I mean, unfortunately, Albert, who the actor passed away after the show was
Yeah.
done. And sort of the I say this in my video that a lot of the themes of the new series are about death and about aging. And when you think about it, 25 years of silence, 25 years of no Twin Peaks, a lot of these actors didn't do much except for the original series. And so
Right.
here's Log Lady back for her final performance in anything. And David Lynch can't be making this and thinking, like, oh, this is like, it's just like old times. Like, no, this is the last hurrah for a lot of these people.
Right.
And it was for some, and it might be for others. And like, as a result, that is like, it's really hard to ignore that when like, I mean, the Log Lady death scene is not just powerful because it's really well done. It's also powerful because she was dying, and she did die. And like
Yeah.
that dialogue is not, and I'm like, it's hard for me to even talk about this, but that dialogue that she says hits really fucking hard because it's not the Log Lady telling it to Hawk. It's, to me, when I hear that dialogue, I hear it as Mark Frost and David Lynch saying that to the Log Lady, like telling the people in their lives that this is how they feel, that we're getting old, we might not live forever, and whatever happens next, like we should be okay with not being afraid of it. And
Right.
so for me, the meta narrative isn't so much about saying fuck you to fans of the original. It's not so much about, saying like, why are you watching this, you asshole? It's basically saying, it's basically about, to me, it seems to be about like carrying, it seems to be about carrying the Twin Peaks show into the afterlife. Like, it's about sort of the death of Twin Peaks. It's about the death of not just the people, not just the people in the show, or not just the show itself, but like, it's the death of the cultural phenomenon. It's basically saying like it has to end. and
Right.
and so, I mean, we can talk about the ending in more detail, but like, that, to me, that's also why the ending is so absurd, is like, it's carrying Twin Peaks to its end point. It's saying like, and I wouldn't mind if they made a season 4. I'm sure David Lynch would find some way to make it make sense. But if this is the last we ever get of Twin Peaks, it's a very fucking powerful series about like, what it means to live this long, what it means to live and to be remembered and to be cared for. Because Twin Peaks is not something that people hated, or something that people didn't fight over it because they hated it. They fought over it because they loved it. And
Right.
David Lynch is not trying to mock people or insult people for loving it. He's trying to carry that love into old age rather than trying to carry it in this sort of like starry-eyed nostalgia goggle thing where he pretends that nothing has ever changed. He's readily admitting that so much has changed, but he's also admitting it in a way that says that that can be okay. That it can be okay that this might be the end of it. That this might just be the end. It might just be over. And one thing I've learned unfortunately, from people close to me passing away, and this is something really powerful and personal to me, but a pretty important friend of mine, the last conversation I had with him, when the conversation was done, I knew when I was done talking that I should have said more than I did. I should have said how much he meant to me and how much, and this was before he even died. I just knew there was something wrong. I knew that it was wrong that I didn't really get across the point that what he's done for me means a lot. And then he passed away and I never got to say it. And later I learned that friends of mine told him that that's how he felt. And, you know, knowing that the conversation that I had with him, the last conversation I had with him, wasn't what I wanted my last conversation to be, wasn't powerful. It was just sort of like mundane. It was just sort of spending time together. Knowing that, I kind of realized that there, things don't always end on the note we want them to. They don't always end in a way that is satisfying and feels right. Sometimes it just feels like a question mark. It just ends in a big question mark. And I learned the hardest lesson I have ever had to learn in my entire life was learning to be okay with that.
Yeah.
And that's why The Return was so powerful to me, is because I was willing to accept that Twin Peaks ended with no resolution for the first time around. And so when people were pissed off that there was no resolution, when people were getting excited for this whole narrative and trying to figure out what it all meant, I just don't think that's as important. I don't think it's as important to like have a finality that ties everything together. I mean, he gave us the absurd version of that in episode 17, but then he pointed out that there's something wrong with that, because like reality isn't as cut and dry, and sometimes it's okay to just let it not be cut and dry. And that's kind of the takeaway I got from the ending, and what I got away from the whole series is that, like, I mean, that's also why he seemed to be fucking pissed off that people wanted to know who the killer was in the first series, is because
Right.
he didn't want a sense of resolution that was based on this sort of like strict adherence to guidelines of storytelling. He wanted to give people something that was more honest. And what I love about Twin Peaks: The Return is how honest it feels. And the whole return is just like 18 hours of like being very personal. And it ends in a way that I think that whether or not he was trying to, what he did was he sort of captured that feeling of learning to find finality when things don't always all make sense in the end. Because that's just what, I mean, it sucks to do the basic film school thing of, oh, well, that's just what life is like. But, like, genuinely, he's not trying to say that this perspective is true because life is really like it. He's trying to help us relive the reality of life through the fiction of the series. He's trying, when we think about the minutia of our lives, he tries to capture that in the series, not because he's trying to emulate real life, but because he's trying to evoke that same mentality of how we should approach life. Like, he's trying to like really get to this idea that like the way that we like approach art is so separated from the way that we approach life, when that shouldn't, that line should be more willingly blurred. And that's especially why I think that the ending ends with basically Dale Cooper leaves the reality of the Twin Peaks fictional universe and enters into our reality, is because that's sort of trying to make the point that there's a blurred line between the distinction of art and reality, and that blurred line is both how we engage with the media, what we take out of the media, and also what the people who make the media put into it. And so calling to this idea that it's all just a dream, which he does in the ending, and now I'm just getting into the ending. When he calls it all a dream, what he's trying to do is trying to make us recognize the relationship between what we're watching and what we're experiencing in our own lives. Like, he's trying to get to this point that I think he's trying to get to this point that the line between, what we consume and what we live out is something that is always blurry, and we should be okay with it being blurry. What do you?
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a million things.
No. I think you're spot on though, and also like kudos for the super relevant story too. I mean, I know that kudos is probably the improper way of putting it, but like it's so true to the world, and it's so true to relationships that I've had, and it's, it's certainly true to relationships that everybody's had, and it's like this weird kind of universal truth of the whole thing. And I think you're correct in all of that. And I think ultimately when we're getting down to the whole thing, that seems like the true purpose of all of this. And intent doesn't matter or whatever, but like the whole purpose is that kind of the fleeting nature of life, being like blunt about that sort of thing. David Lynch is old, all of his friends are dying. How do you cope with that? I think in one part it's this too. It's you got to treat it all like it counts. Not necessarily saying there's like some sort of apocalyptic event where we all die and it all matters, or have some sort of theological point. But the point is really that like in some way it does all count. It feels like it would count. It feels like it all matters. So, David Lynch coming back and directing 18 hours of a TV show is hard to do, especially in his old age. I mean, it's such a task. But he didn't see it. Have you watched the behind the scenes stuff yet?
I've watched a little bit.
Well, he doesn't come across in it as if he is unenthusiastic. He's genuinely happy for a good majority of it, and it's got to be because it's, besides it being the thing that he loves doing, it's him feeling the true sense of charity. It's his charity. It's his way of making it all count. It's him imparting his experience onto the world, and having this chance, and also having the chance to employ all of these people and have all of his friends back, and all of these people working in great meaty creative roles and getting to live some sort of fulfilling life. I think ultimately the ethics of that are pure. And I know that we've spent a lot of time debunking this idea that it's the big joke, it's the big, vile, angry, spectacle joke kind of thing. But I mean, ultimately, why do it? Why do the thing? A joke isn't worth that. But feeling like it all counts in some sort of charitable sense, I think is worth that. It's not him wanting to impose himself onto the world as much as it's him wanting to put all this out there one more time. Because I you gotta speculate that this is maybe the last thing he's gonna do of this size. And that's a sad thing to speculate, but I mean, it's the truth. I don't know. It's a sad truth if it is the truth. But yeah, I don't know. That's I think he treats it like it all counts, and this is him saying that this is his way of reconciling how all of this stuff kind of matters in a certain sort of way. I don't know. Anyway,
it's one of those things where, like the way I approach anything I've ever made when it comes to videos, but like the way I've always approached engaging with art is just like, what does this help? Like, what am I understanding from this? What am I gleaning from it? And it's never like, I mean, I have a million stories that can help contextualize what I'm seeing when I watch a show or a movie. And like, I think in terms of like meaning, and I think in terms of the value of meaning, because like spectacle just I like spectacle, but I like it when it serves as meaning. And the reason why meaning is so important to me is because I want to be a better person. I want to do better things. I want to understand things more. And I don't gain any of that through escapism. I gain that through things that are maybe a little bit of a nightmare to sit through. But I was thinking about one one interesting anecdote is when I saw Transformers 2 in the theater, everyone clapped. And that in retrospect is a bit absurd because that movie is fucking terrible. And you know, I was thinking like one day I want to be a sociology professor. I want to like do theory work. I want to like be involved in like activist work, and I want to like I want to like go on stage and, you know, or like give talks in classrooms or something, and be in front of an audience. And I realized that, you know, if I have people clapping for me, that could be meaningful or it could be meaningless. It could be the Transformers 2 situation where people are clapping because they enjoyed it, not because it gave them anything of value. And I'm not trying to insult people who enjoy Transformers 2. I'm just trying to say that you're not learning much from watching it. And, you know, when I make a video, the thing that matters to me the least is how many views I get. The thing that matters to me the most is if somebody says something that I hadn't thought of that they took away from it. Because that means that, like, I'm progressing something in some way. And that's what I think about is, like, if I were to make something that means a lot to me, if I were to give a speech or make a movie or make an album or something of that sort that means a lot to me, the last thing I would want is applause. The thing I would want most is to have someone tell me something about it that resonated with them and that's important to them. And it's because I want to help. Like, I want to help people. And, you know, when I think about the end of The Return, if I pictured it in a movie theater setting, I cannot imagine that there would be applause at the end of The Return. People would be done and they would be scratching their heads and saying, I don't know how he felt about it. But the thing is that provokes a lot more introspection than any spectacle clap at the end movie would. And because it provokes that introspection, it provokes people to think about like themselves and to think about their life and to think about like what they're doing. And like, I don't feel that David Lynch is like intentionally trying to make big statements as though he's better than anyone. I think he just is a very earnest person who it shows in his art, and that provokes people to think about things. And that's the same thing I got from the beginner's guide, because when I finished that game, my mentality wasn't, this is the greatest game I've ever played, or wow, this is so good, I want to show everybody. I was just thinking, I need to talk about this with someone because I don't know how I feel. And the more I thought about it, the more I talked about it, the more I realized how much that game meant to me, because it just left me with so much to think about. And that's what The Return has done better than any TV series I've ever seen. I mean, I've seen a lot of TV shows that you could make the case are very great TV shows, but like nothing hits me as hard as some of the stuff that happens in The Return, like the death of the log lady. And another thing, and we'll talk about the ending in more explicit detail soon, but the scene where Cooper reunites with everybody in episode 17, that scene struck me really hard. And like, there's a lot of scenes that struck me really hard, and that's one of those things where it's like, I never got that out of the original series. Like, I really loved it, but it was sort of the clap at the end spectacle thing where I was really entertained by it, but it was mostly just a good show with likable characters. And like, you know, in retrospect, The Return hits me so much harder than the show, though I will say the movie hits me pretty hard.
Yeah. So okay, but so maybe we should get into the ending then.
Yeah,
that'd probably be good. What the fuck? What do you think's going on? I think episode 17 is rather straightforward. I think we can all agree. I mean, I love the moment where Dale, his face is low opacity over the entire scene because he knows that something's wrong, and so the entire, like, ending, emotional catharsis ending of the entire show has his face in horror over the entire thing. I love that because it totally deflates the ending. Like, you can't enjoy the the big ending because he's he's haunted by the moment or whatever. Like, he's stuck there for a moment, and I love that. But then episode 12 is the whole the truth of the thing or whatever.
Episode 18?
Or episode 18, sorry. Yeah. What am I saying? It's the Mulholland Drive ending kind of thing, or that's how it felt to me. I mean, a lot of people have speculated other things, but I don't know. I kind of think that it's kind of got the Mulholland Drive ending in a lot of ways. I mean, not the exact same thing, obviously, but I mean, I think it uses that same kind of framework of the detachment from the narrative to the quote unquote true narrative, to talk about the even grander things at play that we didn't even know was going on. I mean, it's the whole we're in a dream, who's the dreamer kind of thing. I mean, there's multiple levels to that. I argue in my video that it's a collective sort of dream, and I think that is true, but also I think in context to the specific narrative, I think Dale is not Dale. He's a dreaming vessel for some other thing where he's this guy dreaming about how he's much better than he is, much nicer, much more pure, much more lovable. I mean, I don't know. I kind of think about that moment in the original series where he like doesn't have sex with Audrey Horne. It's like the most pure kind of guy. But do you really think that the guy in episode 18 would have not had sex with Audrey Horne? I don't. I think it would have totally happened. I think he would have taken advantage of her. There's some kind of disconnect there. Something is missing. Something's wrong,
Yeah.
So that's kind of my vibe with it. But
well, I do want to say that one of my favorite things about your video, and I'm gonna compliment it.
Thanks.
Is the idea that all the characters are sort of experiencing their own little dream reality, where Ed is like, his dream is to get with fuck, I forgot the
Norma.
waitress's name.
Norma.
Yeah. His dream is to get with Norma, and he gets it in the end. And then we get Bobby sort of living out his reality where he's become like a genuinely good person, which when you think about it, especially if the most recent thing you had seen of Twin Peaks before watching this was Fire Walk with Me,
where he's a
Bobby
murderer.
He's a murderer. So like all these people are experiencing this like basically alternate reality in which they get some form of like living out their former glory, for better or worse, because Audrey Horne doesn't get the good version. But
no, yeah.
But that's very true to her character, who got in like a bunch of fucked up situations, like especially with One-Eyed Jacks.
Briefly, I love that moment where Audrey Horne finally shows up at the Roadhouse, and you realize that all the musical performances are the shows that she's been missing. Like, they're all the internal things that she's been missing throughout the show. Like, I want to be at the Roadhouse so that I can see these fantastic performances, but she's not, and we don't find out about it until later. It's good. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
That's something that I hadn't really thought about, but I will point out in terms of the just plain narrative that while most of the scenes in the Roadhouse are completely disembodied from any part of the narrative of the rest of the show, there is specifically the stuff that happens with James.
Yeah, and that too.
And that stuff ties into the ending. Also, I guess we'll get into some minor. We'll end on minor details that we love or that we have thoughts about.
Okay,
But I
yeah,
want to talk
sounds
about the
good.
ending a bit. So a few things about the ending. I'm gonna start with episode 17. First of all, it is the fan version of the ending. It is
Right.
every possible thing that we could have ever wanted. We undid all of it. Laura Palmer's not even dead anymore. It's fucking absurd. And I
Yeah.
was my jaw dropped. It literally dropped when that happened because I'm like, what the fuck am I watching?
Yeah.
And I was blown away. And like,
They like go back and rewrite history in order to anyway. Yeah.
and like, it kind of destroys the narrative, which is part of why I think the ending turns out into such a nightmare. But it also is a positive ending in the sense that like you see Pete walk out and he never finds a dead body, and like that kind of means that Twin Peaks just kind of goes back to being a peaceful, quiet town.
Yeah.
Like if Laura Palmer never died, then like the town, the looming evil over the town is no longer there. Like,
Right.
and so it sort of implies that Twin Peaks has like like moves on to a better reality with that. And the thing about like the ending, like, you know, again, it's so hard not to pull from really personal experience because that's how I kind of see all media. But the fucking ending with Dale Cooper staring, my instinct is, what the fuck is he staring at? And I have three answers for that. Possibly he's staring off into he's in the Red Room or in the Black Lodge or in somewhere in that suspended state of like the surreal external universe.
Right.
And he's staring off into nothingness, basically. That's one answer, is that he's staring beyond reality. The second one is that he's staring directly into the audience, as in he's become self-aware that he's within the confines of a fictional story and he can tell that he's being viewed. That's another possibility. And then the third possibility is he is watching what is going on happen externally. Like he's watching the scene unfold from an external point of view. And I do really think it's possible that he's just stuck in the Red Room in terms of the straightforward narrative of the series, but the narrative I don't think is as important as like the themes. And in terms of him staring at the ending, it's sort of what I find so powerful about this scene is that it is the good ending. It is the, yes, everyone's reconnected, everyone's back together. We're going to have, you know, what I thought was going to happen for the ending. I genuinely thought for a minute, before his face showed up, I genuinely thought for a minute that we were going to get the Toy Story 3 ending, where episode 18 was just 50 minutes of everybody getting their positive ending.
Yeah.
And instead it's a fucking nightmare, which I love that. But
I much prefer the nightmare, to be honest. Yeah.
the moment when it turns into a nightmare is the moment when he sees Nido, who turns out to be Diane. But the first time he sees Nido is in the dark sea or whatever, in that waiting room. And what she does is she goes up and she reveals to him this endless plane. And it's like this plane of infinite space. And it's like, really, when you think about it, it's a box that contains an entire realm of, like, an entire dimension inside of this tiny box. And outside of this dimension, there's another dimension. And inside of that dimension, there's also the Red Room. And inside of the Red Room, if you leave the Red Room, you enter into the world of Twin Peaks. So within the fictional universe, there are like 3 layers of dimensions outside of Twin Peaks, which when he sees Nido, I think the reason why what is happening is he's basically dissociating. And staring off into space is a dissociation thing, and I have dissociation issues. I've had it happen where even when I'm in a positive moment, even when I'm in a good moment, I feel it happening externally, like I'm watching it happen like a movie. And so Cooper is watching reality externally. He's watching the happy ending and he's not experiencing it. And that's what I think is going on, is that he's watching something beyond just what's on screen, and it's fucking disturbing him.
Yeah.
And it's making it hard to cherish this moment. And like, that is so real to mental illness experiences that I've had. I do bring this up in my Upstream Color review that the editing of that film mimics experiences with psychosis way too well. And that film, that feeling of not being able to live in the moment is like a really fucking hard experience of mental illness, and it's something that like relates to trauma and relates to this like feeling of like distance from reality and from everything around me. Like my own life becomes like so distant to myself that I end up like not being able to give a shit. Like I had a really great week, like I think 2 weeks ago or 1 week ago. Like I gave a talk at my school and 20 people showed up and it was a really good moment, and I just felt like nothing afterwards because like I was so out of it that I was on autopilot. And that's kind of what I think about, is this triumphant ending that's underscored by this like distance and this like nervousness that happens. And really that's when reality for the whole series starts to break down. But when you go back to the beginning of The Return, you find that it was always breaking down. It's just that he returns to this like insular little small reality of the Twin Peaks universe, and then he's already been exposed to 25 years of this external and so like it almost has this, I guess, cosmic horror element where there's so much beyond human comprehension that we can't fucking fathom it. And so it makes it almost hard to cherish the moment we're in right now. And so like that's why I think it's a meditation on death, is that this ending is like showing, it's basically him recognizing that there is something far beyond what's going on, and that makes it like being stuck thinking about that makes it kind of hard to cherish the moment while it's happening. And this isn't something that I'm sharing an interpretation of, it's something I thought about, is time literally stands still in that scene. And that's something that people don't talk about in any videos I've seen, is that the clock keeps ticking at 2:53. The clock isn't moving forward. It's stuck in this like suspended state of like ticking back and forth.
Oh yeah. I hadn't made that connection. Huh. Or maybe I did. Man, I don't even remember. Oh my god.
And
What's
so
happening to me?
that scene is probably one of my favorite. It's probably my favorite scene in any media ever, because everything about it mimics my experiences with mental illness, and then it also seems to have this like theme about the frail nature of reality and how it starts to break down. And you can add more to that because I don't want to take up too much.
Well, I mean, I feel like we're kind of on the same page with it. I really like this idea of like of the infiniteness, kind of coming down on somebody. I think that's a true experience of like disassociation, is this idea that yes, this is such a happy moment. I'm at a party and all my friends are here, except I'm also on a spinning rock, in a universe, and I'm gonna die, and we're all gonna die, and we have no idea who we are, and we have no idea what our place is in all of this, and we don't know if there's a god or not, and if there is a god, is he evil? What is all this? I mean, don't hold me to account to any of these things as being my like personal beliefs, but the terror is there. The abject terror of just knowing that we're so small, in a moment where we should give in to the emotionality, in the peace and the happiness, But the ultimate horror is when he wakes up as somebody else and realizes that he is, so small, and he goes and sees the big cup of coffee, or the big mug of coffee, David Bowie's ex character, and what, I can't remember that character's name.
Philip Jeffries.
Yeah. Cup of Philip Jeffries, where Philip Jeffries is just like, it's infinite, it's infinite times, and universes and places and possibilities and all of that. So, he saves Laura, but, but what does that do? That's the question, right? He saves Laura from this timeline. Well, what does that make him? What's his purpose? He's succeeded, right? He succeeded. He saved Laura's life. But now what is he? Who is he now to all these people? Like, that was his purpose. And he fulfilled it. Like, the second he stopped doing that, it's like everything falls apart at that point. At what cost, too? Undoing the death of someone. At what universal cost? The cost of completely annihilating reality. That's the abject terror of that last episode. And I heard a lot of people around the time when this was coming out, they were saying, watch episode 17, just don't even bother with the last one unless you really want to be confused, because everybody was saying it was kind of a, it was a tease for the next season that may happen. It's like they had to do it to get another season. They don't know. Like, that episode is like the point, It's the smallness, it's the microscopic nature of this whole thing. I'm going to sneeze. I'm back. So, I don't know, man. That's kind of where I'm at with it. It's still in my brain every day. I think you relate to that. We'd talked about that before, where it just feels like it infects you. And it's, see, here's the ultimate problem. Let me tell you the problem. Everybody online and the way they talk about this show, it's all so missing the point. It feels to me. There's a disappointment in the conversation surrounding it, where everybody wants to know who that person was at the house, and they want to know who they want to know the specifics, somebody made a video, and this is no shade, to that person. I haven't seen their video, but I've just seen this floating around. This kind of idea is like figuring out who the mother was in that scenario where he was in that other dimension, at the beginning of the show, and figuring out who that mother character was. It's irrelevant. It's like the minutia and understanding the minutia, fun, right? But it's like missing the forest for the trees. And that's the great disappointment with this, is like, when Mulholland Drive came out, we didn't have, I didn't see the movie when it came out, obviously, but, the internet wasn't around for people to fan theorize, all the stuff. It was around, but the fan theorizing wasn't so widespread. And now, David Lynch put something out, and it's like the ARG folks jump on it too. It's like, who is this person, and who's this person, and what do these people have to do with this? And, it's not. Is it a search for truth, really, in this artistic thing we've seen? This medium. Is it talking about the general ideas, or is it talking mostly about the minutia? And I think the disappointment is just that it feels like we only seem to hear about the minutia so much. And when something this huge comes out, it's like getting a new Kubrick movie kind of deal. You want to hear somebody talk about it in some sort of meaty way, where they talk about the whole meaning of the whole thing, like act as if all this minutia is irrelevant to this main thing. And that's, I like that it's unavoidable for us to talk about these sorts of things, because I think that characterizes us a lot. But also, I think that's kind of what we both succeeded at with our videos, which is also why our videos aren't popular quite like, the other videos, but because the audience isn't really looking for that. But at the same time, I think that gets to this whole thing, really, like the whole point. Why did David Lynch make this? It's not for people to nitpick, or not nitpick, but like to get into the details and figure it all out, like in some sort of minute way. It's really reconsider it all. Everybody watched episode 18 and they were like, what happened? Who were those homeless people? And what? And it's like, to me, it was so visceral. It's this moment of really taking a stand. It's like this bold kind of presence in film. It's so good. It's such a big thing where it's David Lynch saying, fuck nuclear war, right? He's saying fuck the nuclear weapon and stuff like that. And it was weird because I had people in my comment section for my video saying, oh, well, I don't think he's actually saying, I don't think that's actually relevant because, the nuclear weapon is innocent in and of itself. It's the way we've used it. But it's no, we created it for mass death. It is this thing of evil, and it's like that's the boldness, that's the thing that's there, the radical nature of the show, that it's like that's the thing, that's the thing we need to be talking about. So I don't know, I'm fairly disappointed in the conversation, really.
Yeah.
I
think The Return exposed why the video essay genre is a bunch of bullshit. And it's because it's because, David Lynch was clearly setting up a bunch of dominoes so that we could all think that we could figure out how to knock it down, when really he was just playing us all for chumps. But it wasn't a prank. It was an exercise. It was he was deliberately creating ideas that wouldn't lead anywhere. Like, that's fucking obvious. That has to be true now, because we know for a fact that he made episode 18. He shot some of that
by
very
himself,
last stuff first. That's the first stuff that they shot for it, was some of the stuff in episode 18. And so it was all scripted ahead of time. So we know for a fact that the stuff that doesn't lead to anything wasn't going to lead to anything. He wasn't doing it by the seat of, he wasn't doing it, off the cuff. He was deliberately setting things up that wouldn't pay off. And so, when I watched the people talking about what episode 1, the glass box meant and stuff like that, I was like, by the time that this is over, people might be completely full of shit, because I know David Lynch. I don't know Twin Peaks as well as some people might, but I know David Lynch better than most people, because I watch his movies intently and very often. I saw Inland Empire 3 times. Some people haven't seen it even once. So I know what he can do, and I know what he is willing to do. And I didn't expect the ending, because the ending is fucking weird as hell. But I did expect that the payoff would not be as obviously tied together neatly as people expected. But I kind of knew that there was something going on with the sort of meta, the conversation surrounding the show. I knew that there was something off, and I knew that I felt like that was part of the point, is that there's something off about the way that we converse about this kind of stuff. And so I wanted to. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the ending. I'm going to talk about episode 18. Episode 18 is basically part 4 of a very common trend in his films. I haven't seen Wild at Heart, so I still don't know if that is something that happens in there. I haven't seen Straight Story, but it happens in Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, and then The Return. And the way he referred to it in Lost Highways was the fugue, as in in music, the fugue is this concept of the music will just shift to another idea altogether, and it won't resemble the same song anymore, but it's still one continuous piece. Lost Highway, he started making that film because he wanted to explore the idea of the story changing midway. It just changed. It just became a new story, new characters, new plot, new setting, even new entirely. And so Lost Highway's incoherent story is all about the change from one transitioning from one story to a completely different story. The same thing happens in Mulholland Drive. The same thing happens in Inland Empire with an asterisk, and I'll get to that in a second. And then the same thing happens in The Return. What happens in Lost Highway, and sorry, this is going to be spoiler alerts for people who haven't seen it. For people who haven't seen any of these films, spoiler alerts for all of them. In all of them, the fugue is a moment of death. The moment when Fred in Lost Highway turns into Pete is the moment when he has migraine issues so bad in his cell that it can be implied that he died, and then he becomes Pete. And Mulholland Drive, she wakes up from a dream and basically reenacts the last moments of her life as Diane Selwyn and before dying. And the moment when it switches is the moment when she basically accepts that the fictional reality she's constructed for herself isn't real. So that's sort of the death of Betty and Rita. And then Inland Empire, the fugue actually stops. And that's one of the interesting things about Inland Empire is that instead of carrying on with the new story forever, the story actually it starts to devolve into a narrative because it's a film within a film on high it's something Blue Tomorrows, I don't remember. And basically what happens is she's an actress within a film, and then the character that she's it becomes so blurry that you can't tell if you're watching the film within the film or if you're watching the film. If you're watching Inland Empire or if you're watching the film inside of Inland Empire. What happens is the moment when the story shifts is when the character that she's playing in the film within the film dies, and then the shoot for the film wraps up, and she goes on to live her life as her normal self. And so the moment when the story changes forever is a moment of death. And so what happens in episode 18 is actually the moment when Laura Palmer is being carried by Dale Cooper away from the murder site. That moment replays in episode 18. It ends episode 17, and then it happens again to start episode 18. And I think the reason why that happens is basically that is the moment of the fugue, is the moment when the show of Twin Peaks basically dies. And then everything we see after that is not Dale Cooper anymore. It's Richard. It's a new story beginning from the remnants of the previous story. And this is also why I think the actual happy ending is Dougie Jones, is because Dougie Jones is the version of Dale Cooper that decides to continue to live with things the way they are and decides to live a good life with his family. The Dale Cooper that's obsessed with trying to find this deeper, fixing everything, and basically he seems to be trying to find this deeper meaning beyond the world of Twin Peaks. That Dale Cooper is the one who goes on to this other realm where he no longer matters. So the one who becomes okay with just going back and living a happy life with his family is the one who gets the good ending. The one who gets the bad ending, the Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive ending, is the one who decides to try to change the reality of the situation. And so basically and this is another thing, I really love the game The Beginner's Guide, clearly, and it kind of ties in thematically where The Beginner's Guide is about this idea that you shouldn't try to change things and you should just accept things the way they are, because trying to change things can make things worse. It can hurt people. So it's better to live with the mistakes than to try to undo everything.
Right,
The Return carries a somewhat similar theme where trying to undo everything, trying to fix everything doesn't work. It doesn't work out. And that's why the ending is sort of a nightmare, is because there is a happy ending there. I just think the happy ending is the one where Dale Cooper or Dougie Jones, whichever one you want to see him as, goes back to live a happy life with Janie and Sonny Jim.
Yeah. No, that's very good. and I think that's very, very well backed up. So much so that I feel like you've kind of you've cracked it. Is that yeah, I don't know. That's real good. That's real good. Wow. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah,
Like,
I don't
know.
Go
It's one of
ahead.
those things where the more you know David Lynch, the more these things start to connect. But
Yeah.
people who only saw the Twin Peaks series and maybe the movie and then saw the new one are going to be like very distant to the stuff that David Lynch has been doing in every film of his.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I find that too, that the more you know, like, kind of what his wavelength is, the more, these things just kind of make sense. Even in, like, a subconscious way, right? Like, you don't even have to think about it. It just kind of happens where you're watching the show, and it just, it just feels like your brain is filling in the missing pieces as it goes. And you don't have to stop and ask what the hell's going on anymore. With the exception of the sweeping. I actually, I got a lot of people tweet me over the sweeping because they were like, I mean, not recently, but when the show was airing, I every week I watched the episode and I was like, it was amazing, but there was the week with the sweeping and everybody was like, what the hell's with the sweeping? Why did that happen? And I don't know. I don't know. That's one of those things where we don't have to. I don't know. Is that like a cop out to say we don't have to understand the sweeping? I don't know.
Think so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just another one of those things where it's like, expectations and like setup payoff, kind of deal. It's really long sweeping. You think the episode's going to end, but then it doesn't. And then, it keeps going and there's more information revealed or whatever, it's the show kind of maybe playing with you a little. I don't know. I can't speculate entirely, but there's something kind of interesting about that. I think part of it too is this whole, like, we don't really think about this, but every time at the end of a, like a show at the Roadhouse, it's a disaster in there. And he's got to sweep the whole floor.
Yeah.
So we got to watch, him sweep the whole. It's absurd, it's the Lynchian thing, the madness lurking in the mundane. He's sweeping, but oh my God, is he sweeping? It's so much sweeping. I don't know. That's the madness of the thing. It's like the most pointless act. But the point is that it's pointless. Something. I don't know. I probably sound ridiculous, but maybe that makes sense. I don't know.
Nah, you're good. I mean, I love the sweeping scene because I don't mind watching someone sweep for 3 minutes.
Yeah. That's pretty good.
But people whose I think that happens in the first 6 episodes, right? What I find interesting about The Return is that the structure is actually really well done, but it's one of those things where it's easier to see in retrospect than when you're watching, where the first 6 or 7 episodes are all setting up a ton of stuff that does pay off. Like, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't, but there's a lot of stuff that does. Most of it has to do with Dougie Jones. For example, when he's scribbling a bunch of nonsense on a piece of paper, and then that becomes important later.
Yeah.
And, like, basically, like, all the stuff involving the hitmen pays off later with one of the fucking funniest scenes in TV show history.
Yeah.
With the Mitchum brothers.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, a lot of stuff does pay off. And the setup is 6 episodes of minutia that becomes increasingly frustrating. And then episode 8 is the breaking point where you either decide, fuck this show, or, okay, what the fuck is going to happen next? I need to see. And then the show starts to connect dots. And what I find interesting about that is that episode 8 is basically the point of, like, the entire series condensed into one episode that, like, managed to get that point made without having to string people along throughout the whole series. So it's basically like, even if you hate the show, you probably made it to episode 8 and you probably got you got to see the point of the series without having to see the ending. And so, like, I love it. We'll talk about episode 8 in a second, but, like, the stuff before episode 8, a lot of the slow droningness of it, I think, is just, like, deliberately meant to, like, get people used to the minutia of the show, because it's what it's about.
Right. Yeah. It's funny. My mom watched, she watched all of the original series of Twin Peaks, like, fairly no problem. She said it kind of made her tired, but, you know, for the most part, it was fine. And then she watched one episode of The Return and was like, oh my God, it's the slowest show. It's like, yeah, I feel you. I disagree, but I feel you, you know.
I like slow. I
do
actually
too.
don't like fast-paced stuff.
Yeah, I do too. It's more my, I don't know. I like maximalism and spectacle if it has, you know, like real purpose. Like, I'm making a video about the 2017 It movie, you know, right now, and how it's like a maximal horror film, and how that actually has like a lot of value as spectacle. Which is, you know, it's odd because the last thing I did was this like very slow 18-hour long show that apparently no one watched. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's that. But I guess I see merit in both, but I don't know. Anyway.
So let's go into a few, let's try to get to some minor things and lingering thoughts and details and stuff. So first let's talk about episode 8. Because
yeah.
we kind of covered that when we talked about Eraserhead, but we were trying to be a little bit spoiler free there, and now we can talk spoilers. So, first of all, I heard through the grapevine that the woman, the girl at the end is Sarah Palmer, and the girl that gets the bug entering in her mouth is Sarah Palmer. And I think that's pretty relevant.
I heard something like that myself, which is interesting. I mean, I don't know if there's any truth to that, but, you know, okay, cool.
I mean, episode 8, you know, it's kind of brilliant and it's kind of sloppy. And the sloppiness is, when you break it down, it is a Twin Peaks episode that suddenly shifts into becoming an unrelated art film. And it is related, but it feels unrelated.
Yeah.
Like, it does start off with, like, a very important plot detail, which is Mr. C dies. And then we find out he can't die. And that's a really fucking intense moment. And that really helps add to his character. I mean, I'm not gonna recover everything I've said about Mr. C and Dougie Jones here, because I already made those videos and already explained what I think about Mr. C, that he's basically a absurdist sort of satirical take on like the anti-hero archetype in modern media. But like, when we find out Mr. C can't die, that's when things get really fucking dark, and then the show just evolves into nothing related to that. It becomes more about the origins of evil, and it becomes this, and I talk about this in my videos, I won't go into all the details, but, you know, I talk about how in episode 8, sort of like tying the spirituality of the show to the very real issue of nuclear war, and also like Cold War era social, like societal anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And basically my argument is that that, you know, the situation that of the nuclear fucking nightmare of the Cold War led to the personal realities of people like Leland to abuse their children, and like the nightmare of Twin Peaks is related to the nightmare of the world. It's not just an isolated little town in the middle of nowhere. It's related to this bigger picture, and the bigger picture is fucking, like, basically the nightmare of the surreal, you know, supernatural elements of the show are all tied into the nuclear bomb as a sort of point of saying the supernatural stuff is a pretense for discussing the real incomprehensible horror that we actually experience, because we can comprehend, you know, a woman being abused. We can comprehend a murderer. We can comprehend a murder. What we can't comprehend is the unfathomable evil of the nuclear bomb, which is why
Right.
it's so easy to dismiss it as though it's an inherently neutral thing, because we can't comprehend how fucking, like, how much humanity has to progress to get there. Like, we can't comprehend how many thousands of years of development led to the development of something so powerful and awe-inspiring in a bad way. Like, we can't
Right.
comprehend how fucking, like, the level of evil that exists in our society is such that a nuclear bomb can now exist, and we are doing tests, and that is the life that David Lynch was born into. He was born around the same time that nuclear bomb plot, like that scene takes place. He was born into that, and so, like, his entire life has this looming, like, nightmare over it. And that's kind of what he brings into Twin Peaks, is that this anxiety of the show, of the supernatural elements. It's not about the supernatural, it's about the real evils that we experience,
Right.
including ones that we can fathom, the individual experience, and then the much bigger realities of, war and mass murder and things like that. And so, to me, episode 8 is like a really you talk about this in your video about the soot covered, I think they're called the woodsmen.
Oh, really?
That's the term.
That's cool.
And you talk about this and how 10 years after the bomb, there's these weird spiritual creatures. And, to me, those spiritual creatures are sort of like how the remains of the nuclear, the evil that creates the nuclear bomb eventually trickles down into the realities that we live in, like the mundane, the small scale stuff. And what I find really compelling about the woodsman is, and I guess the soot covered men, when I think of that, I think of them as like coal miners, basically. I mean, they're technically woodsmen, but I think of them as like sort of indicative of like the working class. And like I think about the post-industrial society working class and how the like work standards were abysmal. Like, people were treated awful. Like, there's mines that just were so poorly designed that they collapsed and killed everybody, and like that's a reality. And so when I think about these dark spirits, I think about them as like manifestations of the dark spirit of like the postmodern society that we live in, and like how the nuclear evil can trickle down into the like even if you think about it on purely literal terms, nuclear bombs are not made by individuals. They're made by systems. They're made by a group of people collectively making it. And those people also are collectively, like, if you think about World War II, it's so notorious, especially in American educational systems, that World War II fixed the U.S. economy by putting everybody to work towards the war effort. When you think about how every individual has to play into this bigger picture of war, for good or for bad, that is like, that's how we turn into this society of angst and anxiety and fucking constant fear that we now live in. And so, when I think about episode 8, I think it's very much about how, like, the fears that we experience, the anxieties that we live through are not just individual, they're systemic and they're bigger, which I can talk about that forever.
Well, and they're also something that we don't even realize, is a truth.
Yeah.
We live in it. And I'm making a video about this right now, ironically too. I'm making a video about Beyond the Black Rainbow, which is, I don't know if you've seen that, but it's like an experimental film about social control. Like it's imprisonment, but it's about the larger concept of being imprisoned, but not only being imprisoned, but being imprisoned by power, and specifically social power. So like that is the thing, is like, this is this horror that we don't even realize we're terrified of. It's there. It's this looming presence of something that we can't even quantify. We can't even accept that it exists, enough to even how do you even, it's like you said, it's unfathomable, and I think that speaks to the show's strength too, is in a way, the thing is the nuclear bomb portion of episode 8 is like this thing where you go, yeah, the nuclear bomb, I know that's evil and I get it. But he really wants you to stop and look at it, and think about it and be like, this is real, this has been my entire life. This is going to be your entire life dealing with this thing that we built our own end, like that's that's a truth to our it's, what does that say about our humanity in a certain sort of way? What is that? We're always going to live in the terror of that one creation, so but that's step one. You show him that, but the thing is we can't quantify that idea. So the way he does make us quantify that idea is by using the supernatural, which is like this hokey kind of thing that we can speculate on and feel viscerally, it's a person, it's like a person, but not real, it's like, it's not as ethereal. It's like kind of tangible to us. That's the guy in the radio station, right? He's going around scaring people and killing them for no real reason, ceaselessly, for reasons we don't know, which is, that's a tangible way of explaining nuclear war, in a way that we can viscerally understand. We can perceive it as a thing and feel it and know it, instead of like this esoteric thing that happened way before we were born, that we have this looming presence, but I don't know, it's kind of hard to sit and think about the nuclear bomb, but you can think about, soot-covered murderers. Yeah, I don't know. It's that sort of deal.
Yeah, I completely agree. Part of the idea is like we can't fathom things beyond the very individual, especially in America because of the individualism mentality. We can't fathom like how fucking big a nuclear apocalypse is, but we can fathom the idea of somebody getting killed. And so one of the articles I read about episode 8 argued that a lot of people were drawing parallels between episode 8 and 2001: A Space Odyssey. And the article argued, no, David Lynch was not referencing 2001. He was referencing old artsy stuff that 2001 was also referencing. I don't know if that's true, but I do know David Lynch was a big fan of Stanley Kubrick. He said so in multiple interviews. And I think that he was possibly referencing 2001 deliberately, because 2001's ending... Okay, first of all, 2001: A Space Odyssey is my favorite film of all time. And secondly, the ending is about the incomprehensible. The ending is about experiencing firsthand something beyond what we can experience and comprehend. And because it's so incomprehensible, it manifests in an artistic way through this sort of sweeping cinematography where, the camera's technically not moving, but it feels like, we're moving through space and time through these light colors flashing before our eyes rapidly. And that is meant to capture this feeling of like incomprehensibility. And David Lynch did the exact same thing in episode 8, where when we enter into the nuclear bomb, we aren't just seeing explosions, we're seeing an incomprehensible amount of damage to nature. Like, we're seeing it unfold in the same sort of film language that 2001 used. And what I find interesting is that the nuclear bomb scene is all in black and white until it enters into the bomb, and then it suddenly starts to turn into color. And then it turns back to black and white when we get back to the 50s. And so this colorful nightmare of a scene is basically David Lynch hammering home the point just how fucking extreme the nuclear bomb is. And it might not scare us, but he's trying to hammer home that point that whether or not we can comprehend it, whether or not we want to comprehend it, it still affects us. And that's why we see it manifest in The Woodsman, is because we see, you know, a 50s couple driving their car on the highway and they're just minding their own business, and then they fucking get terrorized with this weird guy, you know, like that is an example where it's like that couple did not think about the nuclear bomb, even though that was something that was happening within their own life, and it loomed over their whole reality, because that nuclear bomb could end the world. And it was during the Cold War, where we came really close to that multiple times, and like to this day that's still true. We could still be on the brink today, and that's still something that's really fucking hard to comprehend. And Stanley Kubrick talked about this with relation to Dr. Strangelove, that the end of humanity is a comforting idea to us, because it's easy to comprehend all of us dying at the same time, and it's easier to comprehend that than it is to die alone.
Right.
And so Dr. Strangelove is almost optimistic in the idea that we all die together, and like and that's he was meant to be sort of criticizing that mentality when he says that.
Right.
But David Lynch is criticizing that through his art. He's criticizing this idea of like that anything that we understand about our lives can be made sense of without this bigger picture of just, you know, incomprehensible darkness surrounding us. And that could manifest in a supernatural way, if you want to go with God and Satan and stuff like that, or it could manifest in a more Carl Sagan way of the pale blue dot, that we're on this tiny planet, or it could manifest in a humanitarian way, which is the way that David Lynch approaches it in episode 8, which is that the nuclear bomb has a notable effect on not just, you know, it doesn't show the effect of the nuclear bomb on politics. It shows the effect of the nuclear bomb on individual people, and that's what I fucking love about episode 8. And this is an aside, so you don't have to follow up on this, but just as an aside, the whole
Okay.
conversation with the teenage couple at the end is like one of my favorite moments in the entire series, because it's just something about it is so like earnest and positive, even during that fucking nightmare of an episode.
Yeah. It's that's one of the weirder things about it. Well, that speaks in a weird way to David Lynch's kind of cadence too. It's like he has these nice moments interspersed with like the truest horror. I don't know. It's a human thing, you know. It's both simultaneously. It's the dichotomy, the grand dichotomy, you know, good and evil kind of thing. I don't know, but anyway, yeah. That episode is such a strange thing. I remember seeing it and it being just this weird kind of, there's no way to expect it, that kind of episode airing, you know, that kind of thing, seeing that kind of thing anymore, you know. It's just unfathomable that it exists, that someone made it. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's the whole show is that way, but that aspect is particularly strange. But anyway, I guess we can move on. But yeah, I don't know. That episode is off the wall.
Yeah. Before we move on to like any topics I've written down, is there any specific topics you want to cover?
I think we've mostly been covering them in a fair pace, you know, at a good pace. Yeah. We've been knocking them out, you know.
Okay.
So
because the thing I want to move on to before we finish is I want to talk about smaller things that either can't have a hard time making sense of, or just appreciate about it, or just sort of like more review and less thematic, although we can't talk about theme, but just things that happen in the new series that stuck out as like something that you really appreciated or give you a lot to think about.
Okay. I love the moment with Andy, and I can't remember her name right now. Oh my God. Lucy, yeah. I love the moment with Andy and Lucy, and they're talking about the couch. Is it the couch?
That's what I was thinking of. They.
Oh, really?
It's a. I think it's a chair, and they're trying to decide between the white chair and the red chair.
Yes. Yeah, that is such a beautiful moment in the show. I love that moment. It's so pure. It's just so pure.
It's one of those moments that feels so like antithetical to this idea that it's all a big critique of nostalgia.
Yeah. Because it's like, I don't know. For you expect something that's a critique of nostalgia just totally purely to be not as pure. It seems like it'd be colder. It'd be this. I imagine a Michael Haneke movie. Where it's just this cold, lifeless movie. Kind of thing. But no, it's so human. It's like, and pure. I don't know. All the stuff with Andy and Lucy is so pure. I love that, like, Andy is immediately on the onset of both the original series and this series. Like, Andy's presence is treated like it's this joke. It's like this mean joke, or one could read it that way. He's the village idiot or something. He looks goofy, that kind of thing. They would say, but he gets serious business, and also, he's legitimately caring, like, and Lucy loves him, like, in a real way, not in a joke way, and it's like this, I don't know, it's this pure thing. But specifically, he goes into the other place, with the firefighter, or what is he? Fireman. Yeah. He goes in there and he sees, the future, and he becomes like a hero in his own sort of way. And I don't know, he's not a joke is my point. He's a joke, but that is criticism. That's criticism of us by making him have the cadence of a joke character, but then being like, no, he's amazing. Don't make fun of, like, why would you make fun of him? Like, it makes you look like the asshole that made fun of Andy, but and I mean, I think Lucy is just wonderful, just in general. I love her presence in the show. I love all the little jokes interspersed with her too, and a lot of them aren't jokes. They're all character moments that kind of build to the same kind of perfection of purity too. Lucy and Andy are really kind of perfect for each other in the sense that they're both very similarly pure and quirky, but not in a way that's like ironic. I love their characters.
Yeah, I second that entirely. I have nothing to add to that.
Oh, okay.
They're just really good.
Yeah, they're great.
Well, I'm trying to think to the early moments in the series, because I'm like trying to go through my favorite moments chronologically. I really do love the scene where the cops are trying to get into the apartment, and they like have to yell at the fucking janitor guy, like the garbage man, like, let us in.
Oh yeah, that's really good.
And that scene felt really similar to the scene in Mulholland Drive with the black book,
yeah.
which is one probably in my top 10 favorite Lynch scenes.
Oh yeah, I love that scene.
But I'm trying to think of like things that happen a bit later on, like there's so many things that are so memorable that you almost forget about these other things that when you think about it again, you're like, oh wow, yeah. Like Matthew Lillard, like his whole character.
Oh yeah,
like,
and how at the beginning you're like, you're like, oh, he's just a nice guy, and then you go, oh wait, no, he's evil, and then you go, oh wait, no, he was just a nice guy. Like, he was just a nerd. Yeah. Like, he was just a weird nerd kind of guy, who just was super into aliens, or whatever. And then he had this horrific thing happen to him. And you feel so bad for him. And then he, gets murdered.
By a woodsman.
By a woodsman in a car. No thanks to, anybody helping him. But yeah, no, that's he's a really tragic character, and he comes in so early. Quick mention of I love, this is such minutia. I love the moment where they introduce Nine Inch Nails as the Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah. That felt straight out of Tim and Eric.
Yeah, that's the greatest thing of 2017. That is the best. I love that so much. I laugh forever about that. Also, their song is excellent. All the music.
Yeah.
All the music is really good. The lady who sang in Mulholland Drive is back, and
Yes.
it was so emotional.
Yeah, that hit me pretty hard.
Yeah.
Because that's probably the most emotional scene in David Lynch's filmography prior is the scene where she's singing that
I don't think
song.
I've ever watched that scene and not cried my eyes out, and I don't know why. Like, it's so powerful, that scene in Mulholland Drive. But her being back, that is like, it's not nostalgia, it's seeing this kind of uninterrupted talent that just kind of poof, there it is. It's this moment of like transcendence just for a brief period. And I don't know who that woman is, but very much. I mean, I'm not as well informed as maybe I should be on what she's up to or whatever, but it must be nice, to be like a religious figure. She shows up and like everyone cries. It's a beautiful thing, and she's great. Anyway,
One of the bigger moments that's pretty much like in my top 5 moments for the whole the return is the arm wrestling match.
oh, I love that too. Oh, it's so good, and it's so suspense filmmaking. It's so pure genre, like suspense filmmaking. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. Love that scene.
That is my favorite example of Lynch's weird sense of humor, because it is so fucking funny.
Yeah.
And then it becomes so dark immediately after. You're like, oh god, this.
Yeah.
Like when he gets punched in the face, I was fucking laughing. It was so funny to me that he got fucking his face punched in so hard.
Yeah. He's like such a superhero,
Yeah, it becomes the anti-hero archetype where he's basically Man of Steel.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's so funny. It's good.
I also really like everything with Harry Dean Stanton, who I've seen him in like 80 different films, and I always love him when he's there. And I'm so glad that he came back from Fire Walk with Me, because
And he has such a beautiful moment there too. I mean, it's tragic and horrible, but there's that beautiful moment where he sees that child's soul leave its body, and then it just you really take in a moment there where Harry Dean Stanton is very old, and you're like, geez.
oh yeah, he passed away recently.
He did.
Too.
Yeah, he did.
There's a lot.
Yeah, he did. Anyway.
A lot of the stuff with Albert and Gordon is actually surprisingly really emotional, and I like that stuff a lot.
Yeah, same.
And one of the things that I think people forget that happened is when Gordon Cole opens his door and sees Laura Palmer's face. That's a really strange scene that also has a really dark emotional quality to it.
I don't remember that happening. Why don't I remember that happening? What do you...
He opens the door to his hotel room or whatever, and Laura Palmer's face is like superimposed over the entire doorway.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's very
I've forgotten that
striking.
this happened. Wow.
Also, this isn't a single moment, but I'm gonna talk about basically everything with the Mitchum brothers is great.
Oh
I
my
hated
God.
them, and then they became my favorite characters ever. And the moment that it sold me forever on these characters is one of my favorite scenes in the whole series, which is the when the hitmen finally get their comeuppance.
Oh yeah.
And I was hoping it would be something where like Dale Cooper would stop them, but instead some random guy just has road rage and just decides to fucking ram his car, and then they start shooting at him, and he fucking murders them, and then
the weird and kind of shitty, sad thing about how funny that is it's funny right now because of how constant like violence and it is and how unpredictable it feels right now. So it's just like that comes out of nowhere, but it totally makes sense. You know, it's like, yeah, that would definitely happen. Like you would see that on the news, you know, some guy just randomly opened fire. You know, it totally makes sense in this like horrible way. So
and
yeah,
it's all
go ahead.
It's all punctuated by the best line of dialogue, one of the best line of dialogue in the whole series, which is when, I don't remember the exact phrase, but one of them says like, a lot of people are really stressed out these days.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's so good. Oh my God. I want to, I can't remember the guy that's like the wife beaty guy who's their daughter's I can't remember the character. God damn it. Bobby's daughter. Bobby and
Amanda Seyfried's
yeah.
character?
Yeah, but her boyfriend specifically, you know, he's so tragically awful. Like he's so shitty of a person, but at the same time, like there's that weird suicide in the woods, and it's like, it's so horrible. I don't know why, but I think about that scene a lot, and I not in any specific way. Like I have some kind of grand comment about the importance of that scene or whatever, but I think it's just so tragic in an indescribable way, and you don't even know why, because he's such a piece of shit, you know. But you can't, you know, in that moment when they're like together and then he kills himself, it's just this weird indescribable pain, you know. It's this darkness of humanity or whatever, you know. That's kind of something I bring up is in my video, is how it feels like everything's gotten so much worse, you know, in Twin Peaks, because it feels like things can only get worse, you know. Everyone's so broken, but that moment is really crushing, I think.
Yeah, part of it is like about how the current generation is inheriting the world that the previous generation is leaving behind, and it's a very complicated world that we're entering into.
Yeah.
Which is a really great usage of the sort of returning old cast with a new cast thing. Instead of doing a soft reboot where it's like, oh, this is the new generation of Twin Peaks, it's like, this is the new generation of Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a fun thing.
No, it's not a good thing at all. It's a terrible thing.
And one of my favorite moments that, you know, it's hard to say blank is the weirdest scene in the entire series, because I mean episode 17 and 18 are fucking weird on their own.
Yeah.
But possibly in certain contexts, the weirdest scene in the entire series, and one of my favorite scenes, is the gunshot in the diner. Do you remember that one?
When he shoots the guy in the foot? Oh no. Oh yeah. No. Oh my God. Yeah, where Bobby and they're like sitting there, and then Bobby runs out, and the woman in the car and like her daughter's like perpetually like vomiting or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really haunting moment. And the kid shot the gun, which is commentary. David Lynch hates guns. Did you know?
It's one of those things where the tone is so perfectly balanced that I can't tell if it was supposed to be funny or not, and that actually makes it a better scene. Because there's a weird dark comedy element to it too.
Yeah.
Because at first you're like, oh fuck, like a shootout's about to happen. Then it turns out it was just some kid, and you're like, haha, it was actually not a big deal. And then the weird vomiting shit happens. You're like, okay, this is now uncomfortable.
Right, which is totally abandoned too. Like we never know what it is, and yeah, man, I don't know. hard to put into words. That, yeah,
Yeah.
but
And so there's all these moments that are just stray moments that work so well on their own. And then it's weird. I guess we can wrap this up by talking about the big picture of the return, like how well it all works together somehow just by being so incoherent.
yeah, it's slice of life, but but it's about that kind of thing. It's non-traditional, but it's so necessary. It puts it all into one big thing. It feels like it all fits in the same basket, but we don't exactly know what these things have to do with one another. But they're all so great on their own. Like every scene of it is so great, but somehow also incongruent, but also congruent, in its own. They're connected thematically, not in a sort of linear way. Like a lot of the scenes you could put in any order and it would still make a kind of sense, emotional sense. I don't know, is my point. It's weird how it all kind of just works out. I don't know.
Yeah. One of the strangest factors about the return is that, I've seen all the new Star Wars films. I've seen some of the new Star Trek films. I've seen a lot of returning to old stuff. And one of the interesting things about, if we talk about Star Wars, for example, it's like, oh, yay, Han is back, Leia is back, Luke is back, things like that. But when we talk about, David Lynch returning to filmmaking, and the cast is not it's not incidental. The fact that Frank Truman was the detective in Mulholland Drive, and that one guy who dies at the diner in Mulholland Drive comes back as a guy at a desk who orders a hit on Dougie.
Right.
And Harry Dean Stanton was not only in Fire Walk with Me, but he was also I think he was also in other David Lynch films.
Yeah.
But anyways,
what else was he in? Sorry, keep going. I'm gonna look this up.
But he was definitely in Fire Walk with Me too. And then even though Jack Nance is gone, he still shows up as Pete in episode 17. Kyle MacLachlan's been in everything. Laura Dern's been in everything. She wasn't in Twin Peaks before this, but she's been in a lot of David Lynch's stuff. And here's Laura Dern. So what I find interesting is that
Harry Dean Stanton was in one of David Lynch's short films in the Cowboy and the Frenchman.
wow.
It's a great one if you haven't seen it. But anyway, sorry, go on.
So, all these actors and actresses and, people involved are it's basically a reunion for all of David Lynch's career. And that's such a different experience from something like Star Wars, where Star Wars is bringing back the story, bringing back the world, bringing back the characters, and bringing back the actors. David Lynch is bringing back a lot of things that are disparate and disjointed, and he's in a way he's paying lip service to a lot of the things he's made. There's echoes of Eraserhead, there's echoes of Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, and Inland Empire, there's echoes of Blue Velvet. I would assume there's echoes of other films of his, and so his what makes the Twin Peaks: The Return such an interesting experience is that it's the amalgamation of a lifetime of work that includes more than just him, but so many people that are now back. And seeing all these people come back, seeing all these, seeing all these, seeing all these themes come back and all these aesthetics come back, and managing to pull it off so perfectly. What makes it so interesting is that it's sort of a reunion show, the same way that on the surface, the same way that something like Fuller House would be a reunion show, but it creates a situation in which that has so much more meaning. And that's, I think, the biggest thing about The Return is that it's I mean, it's called The Return for a reason.
Yeah.
It's very much bringing something back that has been sorely missed by people who've been waiting decades.
Right. And it's not even like a career celebration thing. It's not like he's bringing this back in order to, like, for some sort of self aggrandizement. He's not bringing it back to celebrate himself and his career or anything like that. It's not that. It's not masturbatory. It's like he's bringing it all back because he loves these people. He loves these people he's worked with, and he believes in these things that he's said his entire time, and he's changed. He's changed over his life, and the things that he was saying in Wild at Heart aren't the same things that he feels now. These things kind of change, but they don't really. Also, it's all part of this grander kind of life that he's tried to live, and he's shared it with these people. So he's brought these people back and experienced, life with them again, surrounding these same sorts of things. And it's like this loving thing. You see the behind the scenes stuff, and everyone is so happy to be there. They feel like they're giving the world a gift. It's not like they're giving David Lynch something, or they're doing something self-serving. They're giving the world a gift together, because that's what they feel like their art is, the gift of this whole thing.
It's a shared experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, to wrap it all back around to what I said at the very beginning, like, the main question that I feel most reviewers weren't properly asking is why. And we're as we're wrapping it up, we're kind of answering why. Like, why return? Why bring everything back? And part of it is because we only have so much time left, and it's a chance to do that. Like, it's a chance to bring everything back, to like explore what it means to return, to explore what it means to see these old friends as audience members and as crew and cast. Like, it's an attempt to sort of like make sense of why we should come back to something that we've grown distant from for 25 years.
Right.
Like,
what's the value in
it's
doing
trying,
it?
Yeah, it's not trying to argue that there is no value. It's trying to figure out what the value is. And for David Lynch, and for a lot of the people involved, I'm sure a lot of the value is being able to do something again, being able to make something together that was really meaningful, very personal, gave everybody their chance to have their moment, and still, still managed to capture all these bigger themes and deeper meanings. And it's not a return the same way that Fuller House is a return, where it's like, it's not the toys for the cast and the crew. It might feel like a bit of a Toy Story 3 ending, where everybody gets the happiness that they were looking for. But like, thematically, the show asks the question why, because there's so much more than we can comprehend. And that, like, it asks the questions why because there's so much more than out there that is so scary, that having this little group of people that we know, having this small life, this small reality that we are confined to, is like valuable. And it's sort of like, and I feel like, if anything, The Return is an attempt to sort of like thematically and sort of in terms of the making of, to sort of honor and respect and like recognize the value of like relationships and being alive and being with the people you love and things like that.
Right. Making things together, and why we do it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. It's good stuff. I mean, it's pure in its own way, and I think that's kind of one of the things about it too. Is just I've said that a lot. I've said that a lot over the course of the recording, is the purity of it. But it feels so. it's hard to pin down with one word. You know, it's necessary, it's important, it's pure, it's loving, it's caring, it's empathetic, it's experiential. It, you know, it matters in some sort of grander way. And yeah, I don't know. It's just necessary in ways that, I don't know. It feels like things just aren't. It's kind of hard to watch something like The Return and not feel like a lot of the media that we're used to seeing, you know, is kind of lost its way. You know, it's so uncaring. You know, we see so much uncaring in the world or whatever, and you see something like this that is monstrous, you know, and it shows the pure evil of the world. I mean, there's a murderer who goes around killing people in an office in the show, and it's horrific and terrible. And on set, you know, David Lynch is just having a great time filming this awful, horrible murder. But at the end of the thing, you know, it works out. It works in this way that shows it for its absolute just monstrousness, but to the utmost point about why, you know, and what exactly is doing, and what exactly it means to do it. You know, it's violence that's necessary, even when, you know, when it's vile, it's necessarily vile, and when it's pure, it's pure in a human way that we just don't. It's like we've forgotten, you know. And so I think The Return means a lot, like the name, you know, returning to these ideas of purity and these ideas of vileness that and what those things actually mean that we've maybe forgotten because we've lost our humanity over time or whatever. And sometimes it's just nice to see it and think about it from some sort of, you know, acceptable distance or something like that. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
No matter what profound things we can come up with to say about the show, the most profound thing is the show. You know, it is unmistakable. It's unlike anything else. It's amazing. You know, go ahead.
The concluding thought I have, and this will be the last thing I say before wrapping up entirely,
Cool.
is the main thing that critics of The Return, like people who didn't like The Return, didn't catch, and that The Return brought back to TV and honestly to a lot of media in general, is his earnestness and good-heartedness. And that's sort of part of the point of the show, is that it's bringing back sort of a feeling of earnest, good-natured, you know, positivity even in dire circumstances. And, you know, I think about shows like Black Mirror or, you know, all these modern binge watch Netflix shows like Breaking Bad. They're very cynical, they're very dark, and they seem to be made out of thoughtfulness, but not really heart, not really a strong heart. There's no, like, it feels a bit heartless. It feels a bit cynical and dark and mean. And I think that, you know, a lot of people who dislike the show are just not, they're not like, I feel like a lot of people who aren't a fan of The Return, they're just not used to the language of earnestness that David Lynch is providing. And and that's what saddens me the most about the fact that it's been somewhat controversial, is like, this is clearly a very powerful work of art that's comes straight from the heart and means a lot to the people who made it. And, you know, it's been treated poorly because the pacing was slow or because it was too confusing and stuff. And it's like, you're not getting invested in what it's about. You're getting invested in what happens in it. And what happens in it is, you know, context for those feelings and those things that we take away from it. And that's how David Lynch has always been. And so it's like he's sort of bringing back sort of, you know, non-cynical approach to making big budget art that, we haven't had in so long. And it just feels sort of like an oasis in the modern television era to see something that was made with so much love and that reflects that thematically. And like, I don't know. I think the biggest thing to take away for anyone who's watched it and is on the fence, or anyone who has made it through this whole thing without watching it, the main thing to take away, if you haven't already made up your mind, is like to recognize that the most powerful thing about the film is the series is how honest it is and how much it cares. And I think that's what really is most powerful about it.
Yeah. I think, and this will be my closing statement too, is I think we default as critics to the, the thumbs up, thumbs down, this is good, this is bad model of talking about stuff. And if there's anything, there's a testament here in the way that we've talked. I mean, we've talked for nearly 3 hours about this movie now, or this show, now. And the idea there is that we deserve that, I think we owe that to each other, to really engage in our ideas and really, come at things from a place of genuineness and not come at things from a place of irony. The ironic critic is such a common, I would call it a trope, at this point online, coming at things purely as irony. It's like everything is ironic and nothing is genuine, and it feels so cold, and people wonder why we're so sad and we don't feel like any humanity. And it's like, I think we owe that to each other. And I think if there's anything about The Return that reflects this too, it's like we need to be better. We all need to be better. We can all be better. And The Return is a show about genuineness and about, that sort of thing. And ultimately, when we default to not thinking, is when we don't understand, the rejection of understanding, you know what I mean? Like, it's this common thing now, this rejection of understanding, in favor of the thumbs up, thumbs down, sort of good, bad dichotomy kind of thing, where it's so easy to miss the point and not, speak to the truth or the untruth of the thing or whatever it is, and so it's not to say that people that dislike The Return are, somehow bad or whatever, but it is to say that I think we owe each other a discussion, maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. That's pretty much, that's my pedestal for the end of the podcast. But yeah, okay.
All right. Well, it's nearly 3 hours long, yeah. So I enjoyed talking about this, and if people enjoyed listening this far, then smash that motherfucking like button.
Yeah, if you made it this far, you pretty much have to like it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we both talked until we're blue in the face, so hopefully we don't die after this is over, So you got to smash the like button, subscribe. If we survive, you'll see more content. But anyway,
if we're not
dead.
dead.
But anyway, yeah.
Or if reality doesn't just shift into a completely different
right,
universe.
yeah. If we're actually these people, or if we've been, are we in a dream? Who's the dreamer?
Do you think David Lynch read about the Mandela effect before?
Oh my God, probably.
Definitely.
Oh, definitely. David Lynch made a show about the Mandela effect.
That's the real takeaway.
Yeah. Good God. What have we done?
All right. Thanks for watching. So, see ya.
Bye.